So we're going to look at some DApp ideas and just see how would you be able to use Chromapolis about that. So Alex is going to do some drawing on the whiteboard. And one thing I'd like to look at is social media. Like, could you do something like Twitter or Reddit, something similar to that, but with some interesting properties that would be of more interest?
Yes, I hope so, as long as the biggest concern is privacy, because data on the blockchain is public, it's accessible to everyone. But this is probably not a problem for social media, because usually they already have all the data public. So it's a very good fit for the blockchain. So yeah, let's see how it works. So we have like structure, a general structure of the ape. You have we have like backend parts and the front end. Same way as in traditional way. So basically this part is not different. What is different is that the backend is hosted in the blockchain. So we have, but Chromapolis specifically, it makes it very similar to traditional app in terms of structure. So we have number of tables. So of course, like for social media, you have a user table, you have, let's say, a message table, maybe you have, let's say, a reaction, like upvote. So this keeping track of different channels, messages, reactions, and all that. And these tables, they can links between each other. So let's say a message table, it keeps track of who is the user posting the message. Then
so you're modeling the data now in a relational database.
Yes, yes. It's same way you could model it in SQL.
And that's very similar to how things work today without the blockchain. So the conceptual leap for a developer isn't that big to do this.
Yes, yes. You just have a new programming language to do it, but it's very easy to learn. I'd say in one day you can be maybe not as good as a language you learned for years, but you can already be productive, like learning from examples, because it's really easy stuff, and we make it sure that it's as easy as possible for developer to really start doing it in this way. There are some specific, for example, for user, we don't want a password, of course. We want, instead of passwords, to use a public key authentication. And the framework, it takes most of that. Basically, it's handled by the framework. In the user schema, you just want pub key and use just a framework feature called isSigner, so you can check if user have signed this transaction or not.
So here's the API from the front end to the back end. And am I right if I'm saying that the front end is slightly thicker because of the public key and private key? Because in the normal systems, we used to have a login maybe to Reddit or Twitter or something like that. But here you would have a little bit of like, almost like a wallet functionality on the client side, or?
Yes, yes. So there are several different ways to handle it. So since on the social media you want user to be able to post as much as he wants without basically taking interruption to log in into another app and sign something. So it should be smooth. So we add the wallet functionality like key management to the front end. So there is something called Chromapolis client or post-chain client because it's a library which includes all the features necessary to interact with the backend. It includes a way to create a key, to sign a transaction, to submit a transaction to the backend and receive data. So basically you have also a key store. Just a key pair might be stored in local storage, for example.
So basically this is what's different, this key store. Otherwise it's quite similar to a traditional system, but this has to be added.
Yes, yes, and also we use certain. You need to use post-chain client to make queries, and when you create something, when you post something, do any active action which updates the state of database, you do transactions. So transactions, they basically update the database state, and queries retrieve data. So it can be, query can be quite complex, so you can encode actually some semantics of applications. For example, you might have a query to retrieve all messages from certain user in a certain time period, for example, or all latest messages from all users. And this is something basically the backend receives the whole query, and it's up to backend to kind of execute it efficiently. So on the front end, it's going to receive data this way from a query. And finally, you have actual UI. It can be kind of driven by data from queries to, it can be written for, let's say, in JavaScript. You can use any framework, like we really like React. Right, so we can be React.js. It's pretty traditional, so we fetch data from the server same way as you do using the REST API, for example. You can display all these messages, and when a user, let's say, clicks a button to like something or to post something, you just call the library code to encode this action and submit it to the blockchain. And then, of course, once it's applied, you can retrieve the result using query. So it's the same way, basically, as using REST API. Front end can be mobile, or it can be just a web page. Just added this stuff. But we try to make it as easy as possible to generate a good application. So yeah, so this, and yeah, of course there is difference in how it's going to be like funded. For example, maybe user needs account subscription, because hosting application is not free. It can be cheap in a way, but it's not free. So maybe a user would need to pay $1 per year to be able to host his data. So it's not free for user probably. He also has, like, the app can keep track of subscriptions, for example, tokens and so on.
So there could be tokens in this. So here you have like a rather traditional way of creating, like Twitter or Reddit or anything. It's relational database tables. There are relations triggers, maybe there, or whatever. There are things going. But then you could also have tokens in this, right?
Yes, but actually tokens, they implement the same way as you do in traditional systems. So you have basically one simplest way to implement it is to have a table called balance, which records balance for each user, like Alice owns 100 tokens. So what's different if this movement of tokens requires cryptographic authentication, that's basically granted by the library. And also on Chromapolis, so this is basically one blockchain. It has its own database and so on. And you probably want to connect it to the rest of the system. So there is also special constructs which allow moving tokens to and from other basically blockchains, other dApps. So for example, maybe user doesn't want to have all his balance on Twitter. Maybe he has his wallet with where he can use it for different applications, and when it's time to pay for Twitter, he will just move some amount of tokens which is necessary to pay for what feature he wants to purchase.
What would be the cool thing with this compared to the way it works today? Would there be more freedom from the user? What properties would this system have that would be interesting compared to a non-blockchain solution?
Yeah, so I think in this kind of environment, the important thing is that user pays for storage. So of course, it's for user, why should I pay? But if you pay, you own your data. So you can work with it with any way which you like. And also, this application can develop, it can be very general, the schema to allow different kinds of interactions. And this means that, for example, this front end, it doesn't depend, basically, it's possible to create different front ends for different users. So for example, maybe users would like to have some content curation. So that can be done on client side, and we already have the data. So basically, you can take functional data queries to do a custom content curation or filter bad content, for example, or maybe interact with content with some different way. So this is more flexible. Also, a user can have different applications on different operating systems and so on. So the point is that backend, the blockchain doesn't care. Like it doesn't need specific frontend to be monetized. So this frees up, allows user to use anything, and it's not going to kind of impediment like you see with centralized applications. They require use to certain front end because that's how they make money. They display ads in this content. But with blockchain, it makes money from the hosting itself. So it doesn't require you to interact with it a specific way.
Would you be able to detect manipulation or something? Would there be some kind of openness to the blockchain that one might be interesting to the user?
It depends on what particular kind of application. But yes, sometimes initially when Twitter was made, it was basically just for posting your status updates, like I'm eating some pizza. But now we have President of United States posting important tweets and then deleting them. We had like head of states and so on. So it might be important to show that, prove that certain message was posted at certain times, that it's not faked. For example, somebody can try to manipulate the market, for example, to have the important person like a president or head of some company to post certain data. And if it's just centralized system, it might be done either by system administrator, can be intrusion to create this message which is not signed. On this system, we have everything signed by end users, by the cryptographic keys, and we have everything time-stamped as well.